Hello again everyone and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, let's do it. For those of you who work out at sea, what's the creepiest thing you've encountered while underway? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. All manner of trash out at sea. We were sailing off West Africa in the Atlantic and saw something white bobbing on the horizon and had to investigate to make sure it wasn't someone in distress. It turns out it was a full-size refrigerator just floating in the ocean. Also, the amount of fine sand and dust blowing off the Sahara is wild. The sky turns a shade of orange and the dust gets everywhere. Not working, but fishing in the Chesapeake Bay years ago, out of sight of any land, suitcases started floating by. My old boss was convinced there could be valuable things in them, so he pulled up to pick one up. It was a small suitcase and he said it was heavier than it should be, and he couldn't quite get it out without risking falling in, so we gave up. The next day, there was a news report on suitcases washing up, being found by boaters, etc. It was body parts. Some woman had killed and dismembered her husband, stuck him into suitcases, and dumped them in the bay. Thank God my boss wasn't able to get it on board to open it. A little story from when I was a third engineer on board a reefer vessel sailing southbound in the Atlantic by West African coast. Think we were sailing past Senegal. For reference, the work watches of a third are 0800 to 1200 and 2000 to 000. At around 3 a.m., we had a failure in the main propulsion and all engineers were called to assist with bringing it back online. We managed to bring it back 3 hours later. Already sleep deprived and exhausted from being in a 50-degree engine room, I went up to the stern to have a cigarette. Casually leaning on the railings, staring into the abyss, I heard a voice say, "Jump in, the waters are cool." I was instantly taken back and looked around, only to find just myself on the stern at the time and no one else in the vicinity. I basically noped the F out and went to eat breakfast and get 1 hour of sleep, so I was ready for my watch. On the plus side, I did see whales breaching the water on the northbound sail back to Europe. Not working, but a mini break with my partner to Amsterdam via North Shields. The North Sea was particularly bad that night. The captain was debating whether it was safe to depart and ultimately went for it. The ferry was swaying side to side to the point that all you saw was sky on one side and dark water on the other. Only time I've ever been seasick. My friend and I decided to kayak to a small island off the coast of Biscayne Bay, Mexico in the Sea of Cortez. We ended up getting pulled out by the riptide pretty quickly and had to paddle our asses off to get to the island and avoid being taken out to sea. After paddling for over an hour, we started getting closer to the north side of the island. We could see seals exiting the water and getting up onto the rocks. The closer we got to the island, the more visibility we had to the sea floor. Constant large dark shadows kept passing rapidly below the kayak. Probably just seals, but who knows? The hair on the back of my neck was sticking up the entire time. The local fishermen we spoke to couldn't believe we kayaked to the island. A year or so later, they landed one of the largest white sharks ever caught just a few miles south of there. We were swimming off a friend's sailboat, and there were reports of a great white in the area. That didn't stop us 20-somethings from swimming though. Anyway, I just dived in to come up with this giant gray thing, a shark, right in front of me. I freaked out and started moving toward the swim ladder as fast as possible, while the giant gray fin thing came in my direction as well. All my friends were going, "Oh," and "ah," like the giant gray thing wasn't about to eat me. After I got out, I turned to see what it was. It was a manatee, just coming to say hello. Not so much creepy as it was astounding. I've lost years of my life to the Bering Sea. However, it's given back so much more. My one true life-changing experience was being just north of Diomedes and the sea turning flat. Cloud cover cleared and the cosmos was in full view. Laying on the deck and looking at the universe was beyond comprehension. It was as if I were close enough to taste how it smells. Being so far from humanity and at such a latitude made a huge impact on me. I could have easily slipped into the sea, never again knowing the atrocities of the world. Sea spouts or marine tornadoes. I didn't think much of them other than they were kind of interesting. You'd see them after touching down and moving around and then dispersing. Then one night at around 2 a.m., we got broadsided by one in pretty severe weather. This was while our large vessel was attached to the sea floor. We got pushed off station several hundred meters. We came a lot closer than I'd like to think about to sinking that night, with close to 300 people on board, most of whom were sleeping at the time. Then I definitely found them less interesting and a way more creepy. I don't work at sea, but my friend used to live in an apartment that overlooked Biscayne Bay in Miami. I was at her place celebrating July 4th one year. A lot of people were outside of the complex's courtyard to watch all the fireworks shows over the bay. At some point, someone spotted a small boat coming our way, as if the people on it were intending to stop at the asphalt or apartment's dock. But as it neared, folks realized there was no one on board. Its ropes were untied and dragging in the water. When it got close enough, someone grabbed the ropes and secured the boat so it wouldn't float away. It was a really eerie scene. The vessel had one small light hanging from the ceiling. It was a windy night, so the boat was rocking and the light would swing back and forth, illuminating and then darkening the small craft, its interior and its contents, including a large steel or iron hook that was lying in the middle of the deck. My friend took pictures of it. Unfortunately, they were taken with her digital camera that's long gone and posted on her live journal account, which is also long gone. Many years ago, fresh out of school, I'm working in the North Sea out of Scotland on the rig supply ships, 28-day rotations. I was on watch and was sure I saw a body floating in the water. I told the skipper and we launched an FRC to go get a closer look before reporting it. It turned out to be a very bloated and dead sheep. It was huge, and at least 150 miles off the coast. Not the creepiest story, but it was always freaky approaching it, as it seemed very much like a body, until you got quite close to it. Was on a Navy frigate in the Persian Gulf. We'd send up our helicopters almost continuously to look for dhows illegally transporting oil and other commodities. Once found, we'd launch the RHIB to do board and search ops. The creepy thing is that the Persian Gulf is awash with sea snakes. They're usually 2 to 3 foot long, yellow and black things. Locals say they are venomous. These awful things are aggressive and will try to get onto your boat. Yeah, I remember in the late 90s being in that area and watching the sea snakes that looked like they're kind of floating on the surface. I mean, we weren't an aircraft carrier, so didn't really have to worry, but I've heard really bad things about them, so yeah. Saw some dead cows floating around here and there, particularly in the Med, Red Sea, and Persian Gulf. Lots of sea snakes, so many sea snakes, like one every 10 square feet. Lots of old school CRT TVs are out there just floating around. I'm pretty sure I saw a human leg rafted up with some trash while pulling into Puerto La Cruz, Venezuela. The last most interesting thing was a spherical object covered in marine growth about 10 feet underwater passing by us. May have been an old contact mine. I'm from an inland state with very little sea experience, but when I was 17, I was kayaking off Catalina Island, California with a group and our guide. After a while, we rounded away from the main port to a cliffside area where buildings couldn't be seen. The guide told us to help ourselves to take some fresh kelp leaves just under the surface. So I paddled around to find a good patch, and ended up being the kayaker farthest from shore, looking out at the vastness of the ocean, then back to the shore, with the only people in sight being the group I paddled out with. Really drove home that my kayak was the only thing keeping me and the nothingness. The fresh ocean kelp was nice, though crispy and salty. This one isn't exactly what OP called for, but a few years ago, some friends and I were on a trip to the Adirondacks and headed to Burlington for a day. We were there only ones who decided to take in the breeze of the car ferry deck halfway across Lake Champlain when my friend and I saw a plane in the distance and asked me, the group's aviation nerd, what it was. As it got closer, I realized it was actually two planes close by, getting closer and closer until I saw they were F-22s. In tight formation at only about 3,000 or 4,000 feet in altitude. I guess they were on training maneuvers, but unexpectedly, seeing two warplanes on a heading to fly straight over you at such a height is really something. 1. I was serving on a Coast Guard vessel in the Barents Sea in the late 1990s. This is an area very rich with fish, so a big part of the Coast Guard's job in the area was policing, rescuing, and inspecting fishing ships. The closest coastline to the Barents Sea is the Russia-Kola Peninsula, so the majority of the fishermen there were Russian. One day while patrolling the area, we noticed a fishing group move into a strange pattern. Usually, the trawlers would move like a herd, following the fish signals, but this vessel would keep moving in and out of the fleet, and often moving up right next to the other ships in the fleet, before moving out again. This seemed to us as very strange behavior for a fishing ship, so we decided to send out a boarding party to inspect the vessel. I was on the party. When we came aboard, to our surprise, there was no fishing equipment on the deck, and it didn't seem like the boat had been trawling so well. Still, we had to do a lot of proper inspection and see what was in the cargo. When we moved inside the boat, we noticed that all of the lights inside the boat were changed to red, and there was a smell of old booze and sweat instead of the normal smell of fish. We came into the cargo hold. It was even stranger when the cargo hold also turned out to be empty, so they were not supplying the fleet or taking the cash to store. On our way up to the bridge, we suddenly figured out what was going on. One of the crew's lugers had no school, and the bunk beds inside were filled with scantily dressed Russian girls. It turns out it was a floating brothel servicing the fishermen in our area. This might not seem as much to some, but to an 18-year-old Norwegian, it made me realize how good my life was compared to those of people living across the border, especially considering both girls and boys and the fishermen who were around. This is not but my father, who was a commercial sailor from the 50s to 70s. He was on a tanker crossing the Pacific Ocean. They went from land and kind of middle of the ocean. The Pacific Ocean is big, very big, so the chance of meeting other vessels out there is very slim. Still, one night, when it was completely dark, dots started to appear on the radar. This was in the 60s, so radar technology wasn't close to what it is today. So my father went out to the bridge to see if he could see any lanterns. Nothing. When he came back to the bridge, he saw that the radar was now completely docked with all the dots in shipping. Big dots, too. But we still not have a single lantern in sight. My father thought it must be a malfunction or some weather causing it. Still, the water is flat, and weather seemed calm, so he made a call on the radio for any ships in the area. Immediately, he got an answer from an American voice. It turned out he had managed to cross paths with an American carrier group on Moscow and on maneuver in the middle of the Pacific. He then requested if they could turn their lights on so he could maneuver us safely out. Suddenly, within a few seconds, as he rounded, he described it was like a whole city materialized out of the darkness around them. From horizon to horizon, there were huge carriers, supply ships, egress ships, escort ships, and whatnot. The contrast of being all alone in the vast ocean for days to this was very strange. He managed to maneuver the tanker through the myriad ships, and when he came to the outermost of the fleet, suddenly, as soon as they appeared, The whole fleet went completely dark again, gone. Once again, the ship was totally distanced, and suddenly, as soon as they appeared, the whole fleet went completely dark again, gone. Once again, the ship was totally alone in the vast, dark ocean. He described the encounter as the strangest feeling he experienced during 30 years at sea. A white squall approaching on a radar under cloudless, star-filled sky. First, it was just a skinny green line on the scope, but slowly crept across the whole screen, headed my way. It was pitch black outside, and the wheelhouse lights were on. So every time I peeked my head out of the rail, I saw absolutely nothing. Thinking it was some sort of glitch in the radar, I just kept steaming along, hoping it would just go away. Boom. 10 to 15 foot seas, 40 to 50 mile per hour winds, and pelting horizontal rain. Every single thing on the boat that wasn't tied down ended up on the deck and in the bottom of the cuddy. Shit flying around everywhere and water pouring over the gunnels. I thought for sure we were going down, but after what seemed like an hour, but was only 15 minutes, it was over as quick as it started. Skipper, after what seemed like an hour, and I both needed stitches, and another deckhand suffered a broken arm. We limped back to the harbor, bailing out as best we could, and spending the next 3 to 4 days putting the boat back together. I only sail for 3 seasons, but I've got a lifetime of memories.